create a value exchange with your consumer, receive information, give value in return wherever they may be, and design your business and your strategy around that concept. Welcome everybody, thanks for joining us this morning. So Burke and I are going to talk a little bit about some insights that we've generated from some fairly sizable research that we've done in Germany over the last few months. By way of introduction, again, I'm Jim Rudel. I'm the General Manager of Intuit Mailchimp in EMEA. And to my right is my old colleague and good friend, Burke.
Thanks a lot, Jim. Happy to be here on stage. I think it's especially an interesting topic, given that if you look at the last months and years, I think especially there was a huge impact on consumer behavior, and we saw up and downs and things changing. So I feel it's a perfect time to talk about some of our insights and what we feel like we learned about the market.
Exactly, and Burke's right. This is a very, very interesting time to be in marketing, to be in e-commerce. So much has happened over the last 4 years. So both Shopify and Intuit Mailchimp wanted to spend some time diving into the market to get real insights. What are consumers thinking? What are brands and merchants thinking? How are they investing? And how can we spend a little bit of time giving this audience some insights into what we've learned and how we might be able to influence you having impact over the next few years. So first up, as you can see from the slide behind me, one of the really interesting nuggets of research, of evidence that came out of our research, was that 27% of all consumers in Germany trust brands less, right? So that's quite a significant proportion of the population, but it is still one of the most important factors when it comes to their purchasing decisions. So just think about that for a second. Nearly a third of consumers trust brands less than they did in the past when it comes to their perception of them, but it's still one of the most important factors. And we were trying to glean why has that trust eroded? Why do consumers trust brands less? And what came out of our research was issues around transparency, use of data, poor customer experience, challenging engagement across different channels and different touch points. All of this leads to poor experiences, which erodes trust over time. Burke, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think what is interesting is that when we compare it to other markets, that especially in Germany, trust is one of the most important kind of things. It ranked the highest among all the countries. And we see it a lot, even in our software industry. Any company I worked for, when we looked at how long it took to win a customer over, Germany was always on top, right? It took the longest kind of cycle to go a process, build the trust, understand the product. We always say we have 81 million engineers in the country, so really want to understand how a product actually works, but actually also has the highest loyalty. Customers would stay the longest with a product, the highest retention globally, and I think that's almost something that is very unique in Germany, where it's so important how you actually build this trust. And I think for me it comes down, do the things you say you do, and do that across every kind of touch point you actually have with your customer.
It's great to be on stage with somebody from Germany to give these insights into the German psyche. It's amazing. Thanks. So moving on, this is intrinsically linked to the first slides, thinking about trust and transparency. And again, really, really interesting insight that came out of the research is that half of consumers want targeted brand recommendations based on their data, but 70%, over 2/3 of those consumers want assurances that their data is going to be used responsibly. This is so important because what we've learned at Intuit, Mailchimp, and at Shopify is that consumers are willing to give you information about themselves as long as you're able to give them transparency in return.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's the question what's kind of the value exchange, how it looks like, how you use actual data, create a different experience for a customer. And I think we actually had the pleasure, we had some of our customers being this week here as well. Purelay, great brand. They created this whole kind of club for their members, essentially a subscription service for kind of jewelry. And I think they're doing a really good job of trying to understand the customer base much better to actually be more personalized, right? You can just not just personalize essentially the email you send out, how you personalize the whole experience. It goes how obviously like your online store is adapting, how you maybe even personalize the product itself towards your customer, or how you also like personalize it in like the after sales experience, which often gets a little bit neglected. So how you do like, when a customer calls, you actually know who they are, how to better kind of serve them. You have all like the history about them. So it goes essentially like the whole kind of customer journey. You want to make this very kind of highly personalized experience.
Yeah, yeah. And if we talk about this idea of trust and experience unified under the banner of transparency and use of data, then you can start getting a feeling for how consumers will respond to transparency by giving you their trust, giving you their information, giving you insights into how they want to be served. And as a result, you generate a better customer experience and you are the trusted, selected brand. So moving on to the next slide, moving on to the next set of insights. Again, really, really fascinating. And the stats here, I think, are quite incredible, because what brands and merchants are telling us is that they know that the customer experience is incredibly important, right? 86% of merchants told our researchers that the understanding of customer experience, the delivery of great customer experience, is one of the most important things they can do. Yet, only 7% of them plan to invest any meaningful amount of money into that experience. And this is really, really interesting. And when we dug into this a little bit more, what we learned is that merchants and brands are really struggling to understand how to build an ROI, how to build a business case around further investment in delivering the customer experience, and also what that customer experience means. So one of the strong recommendations we have is to work with either agencies or third parties, or think long and hard about how you understand the impact of customer experience, build an ROI-based business case around deeper investment and getting buy-in across the business to spend more than is currently being spent on improving that customer experience.
Yeah. For me, it's obviously, I hope like everyone kind of knows Shopify, hopefully by now. So I'm just a little bit like assuming it here, but obviously like we're like an e-commerce commerce platform. And what we see obviously a lot is that customers come to us when they're re-platforming or they want to kind of rethink their online experience. And what I feel like very often, obviously, like a reason is we have like a old platform slowing us down. We can't like adapt changes as quickly. Every change is a request to a developer. So how do we actually make like bring the customer into a situation where they have much more ease of use and actually can change and adapt much faster to their business and the requests actually they get from the market. What is very often interesting is that a lot of these projects start very much on kind of thinking about like, okay, how do we create the most beautiful kind of website? And that seems to be very often like the only focus. We need to build the most beautiful website, and then everything else will happen kind of magically. And I think that's when often when we talk about customer experience, we have to obviously think it much kind of broader, right? So it's not just, it's great if you have the most beautiful kind of website, but if no one knows about it, no one will ever kind of get there and like buy kind of anything. So I think it's, when we talk customer experience, it shouldn't be just about how is my online kind of store looking, but actually how do I help customers finding my brand, right? There's a lot of different touch points actually we can kind of think about, and how do we design that and make it all part of the overall kind of customer experience, that customers actually find my store, they engage with my brand, they know where to actually kind of find me, they go to my store, they have a seamless experience, obviously, they find the products fast, they have a easy kind of shopping and buying kind of experience, they have a problem with the product or they need to return it, it's as seamless as well. Because that's like all like the insights we also see, the harder we sometimes make it to return customers, it's like very likely that they don't return as often to like or become a recurring customer, because I feel like the overall experience isn't where they believe it should be.
Yeah, I think a lot of brands, particularly online, struggle with the post-sale customer experience, right? And I'm a bit of a nerd. I'll often go online and look at the reviews of brands, like customers of MailChimp or customers of Shopify or whoever. And what's really interesting is how much impact it has when brands can rapidly resolve challenges that customers have after they've bought. And it's so important that brands and merchants are able to react in a meaningful, timely way to challenges with the customer experience and resolve those. And if you ever feel like spending the time to read reviews of customers who had challenges but had a great experience in having those resolved, and that brand getting a 5-star review as a result, it's pretty insightful.
I keep like saying like I have like one of the stores I recently bought, very kind of niche specialized, but probably like from a user experience from like the whole website, I thought it must be kind of fake, so I had to almost like do a little bit of background check. I ended up buying there and it was perfect. They had the parts I needed available. It was super fast kind of shipped. There was good kind of communication all the time. So I kept buying there, but I keep showing that sometimes as an example of this is probably how an online store shouldn't look like. But still, everything else on the customer experience was so well done, so I'm now like a recurring customer.
Yeah, there you go. And if you're interested, I learned recently that Nike has a 2-year return policy. So if you buy anything from Nike and something goes wrong or something gets damaged in the first 2 years, they'll send you a free replacement 2 years, no questions asked, right? That is amazing customer experience. Okay, I can't remember who was supposed to start this slide. Was this you or me?
Are you ready to do it?
Okay, all right. So you can see AI on the screen, on the slide. We're not jumping on the bandwagon by taking the buzzword and trying to use it to drive the conversation. We wanted to land on some realities based on the research that we got from our consumer research in Germany. This is really, really interesting and really, really important for this audience because over 2/3 of consumers believe that AI should make shopping easier. 64% of those consumers believe that AI can make shopping easier, better. Only 15% of businesses are investing in the critical element of AI or empowering AI in their business, which is collecting first-party customer data. So the consumer is telling the audience here, the brands, the merchants, the world, that they should embrace AI, right? It's not just a buzzword. It's not just the thing of the moment. The consumers have decided that it should be making a difference in the shopping experience, and brands and merchants need to react to that.
So I walked the last days through like a few sessions. I felt like if you play buzzword bingo, like AI would have been on every kind of single presentation. And I think for a lot of things, it means like, when most companies using AI will essentially mean like the products, the platforms they use will get way kind of smarter, right? So it's like, AI is used nowadays essentially for anything. But I think it's like a lot of companies will actually kind of consume it by like taking existing kind of platforms, products, and these products like embedding AI straight into their core. I mean, like we do it at Shopify. I know like Mailchimp is doing it on their platform as well. But I think it doesn't come just like down to technology. There's always trends. I remember like 3 years ago, like Web3 was probably like the most discussed topic, even like here at OMR. So there's always kind of changing kind of technology trends. And I think like one probably like even more important thing to consider is like how you as an organization make sure you actually have the capability and the time to actually explore these new trends, right? So there's always kind of things changing. Technology is probably also with AI evolving faster and faster. And most of the companies I talk to, they're almost like fully kind of busy just like maintaining the status quo. So like very often like half of the resources are like an ERP project or just like, hey, we build our own kind of e-commerce platform we have to maintain. There's almost kind of no time. So I think like with technology keep changing faster and faster and consumer expectations are growing. It's almost like the need, like how you make sure you have time in your organizations to actually test stuff out, right? Just like try things, explore new technologies and see how you can actually adapt them for your own business.
Yeah, it's so important to embrace the concept of testing, learning, and experimenting, right? I'm unfortunately old enough to remember when mobile web was first starting to become a thing, right? And I don't like to admit it, but I was in the room with some of the leading brands across Europe, and I would sit in the room with their e-commerce, their MarTech, and their retail team, and they would say, "Oh, mobile web's just a thing, right? It's just a buzzword. It's just a flash in the pan." And we would encourage them to look at their data because the consumer was telling them every day that they were trying to access and browse and buy things on a mobile phone. Like the traffic through mobile was going through the roof month on month on month. But those brands weren't reacting fast enough. They weren't embracing the opportunity to experiment and test and innovate. And the consumers were telling them that they should. So AI is everywhere. but the research is telling us that the consumers want this audience to try, wants this audience to test and learn.
One of the last thing we want to talk about is obviously how customers expect a seamless experience across like all like the channels. And often we talk just online and offline and treat it as like the two only channels, but actually, especially here at OMR, we see it. There's a lot happening obviously on social. We like launched a few years ago a feature like to like actually use YouTube live selling. So there's a ton of channels actually you can use. Very often as a retailer, you don't have just your own stores. You have essentially you're selling to through other retailers your products to your customer base. So there's a lot of channels. And like the question is always how can you create this kind of seamless kind of experience? And I think for me also like one thing I see like very often organizations is very almost like split up departments, right? So there's like someone is in charge of everything that is retail and like it's essentially like the stores, and one person is like in charge of all like the online experience, but it's not really kind of interlinked. So how you actually kind of bring that kind of together and create this kind of seamless experience across all your touch points we have with the customer. It goes back to what I talked actually before, right? Like how we create the seamless customer experience where like through every touch point you feel like you're talking actually to the same brand, the same customer company with the same messaging, and create this unified experience. And I feel like everyone kind of probably had an experience like this. You go in a store, you want to buy a product, it's not available, they can't really help you. They wouldn't like, ship it kind of online straight to you. You bought it online, you can't return it in a store. I think that's like some of the really kind of basic ones, which are like clearly expected from customers to have this unified experience, but most companies are still like far behind.
Yeah, I've noticed that while we've been talking, more and more people have joined. So
it's a good sign, or like the next session, Kim Kardashian is gone, right? So
word about this session is spreading across OMR, and everybody is flocking. Or the next people up are amazing. But the point about seamless customer experience across channels, this has been the holy grail for merchants for years, right? How do we replicate the brand and the customer experience? How do we give consumers this perception or this reality that wherever they access a brand or a merchant across any different channel, they get this amazing, seamless, consistent experience. And it's really challenging. And as Burke was saying, because it's hard, what we find is that brands and merchants often try and do it in isolation, right? They'll have a particular business unit dedicated to online. They'll have a particular one dedicated to retail. And oftentimes they're not very joined up. Shopify and Mailchimp have been partners for years, and we see these things manifested in a few ways. One of the most challenging things as a result of this is not just the fragmented customer experience, but also we end up with data in those silos as well, right? And if we're thinking about not just creating great visual experiences and engagement, but when it comes to email marketing, messaging, communications, that it becomes incredibly challenging to do that personalized at scale if all of your data is sat in different silos because you've been running the business based on a retail operation, an e-commerce operation, a customer service operation. So the strong advice here is to think about how, even if your business is in silos, how you can unify the data that sits behind those silos so that you can make the best use of that incredibly important asset. So with a minute left, we wanted to summarize some of the key takeaways from the session. So we've talked a lot, there's been a lot of data, but I think it'd be good just to take the top 3 takeaways that we've delivered so far. But do you want to talk about the first one?
I mean, like we talked a lot about trust, transparency, especially like I assume we have a lot of Germans obviously in the room, especially like for the Germans, and obviously how we create this kind of good kind of value exchange, right? Like you can't just collect data and don't give anything back. And I think like we as consumers ourselves like kind of actually like see that, right? There's a lot of services that actually can collect a ton of data about us, but we're actually giving that away very kind of willingly because we have a strong kind of value that we actually perceive for that.
And once you build that trust, particularly in Germany, it stays, right? It's a long-lasting bond. So the second point here, as we've discussed at length, is that brands and merchants need to think beyond a single touch point when they consider the customer experience, and not just in terms of the direct engagement, but the engagement afterwards. So think about your business as one holistic opportunity to create a value exchange with your consumer, receive information, give value in return wherever they may be and design your business and your strategy around that concept.
Cool. And lastly, we talked about the fact that like technology is kind of changing. Things keep always kind of be like embracing. So it's important how you actually experiment, learn, how you make sure like you have a technology kind of platform you're like building up on that allows you actually to do that. So you don't want to, especially like anything that is related to customer experience. It's not like a build once and then run it for a lifetime. It's like a never done kind of project, which is I know like sometimes hard to like hear because like if you like, oh, we invested, there's a timeline, we go live, and then we're like fine for the next 2 years. But especially in the customer experience world, like things are changing on a daily kind of base, and you have to like keep adapting and make sure you have the time actually to invest in kind of testing and learning about new things.
The numbers, the timer's flashing red. We've overrun, so
right.
We'll end on this. If you click the relative QR codes, you'll be taken to a different experience for Shopify and Intuit Mailchimp. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for your time, and we look forward to engaging with you over the course of the show and afterwards.
Cool. Thanks.